The Daily Jaws 50th Anniversary interview series is a collection of amazing conversations exploring the legacy of Steven Spielberg's screen adaptation of Jaws through the eyes of the fans. We'll be talking to famous fans, shark experts, people whose lives have been changed by the movie, and those that were there that helped to make the film. Today's episode has been made possible by Stern Pinball, the world's largest designer and manufacturer of arcade-quality pinball games. But we'll be telling you more about them later. We'll also be telling you about two amazing organisations that are very close to our hearts. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
I'm thinking this, if we get this right, it could be amazing. Ian didn't just fit it with his looks. He fit it with his spirit. It would be an honour to be part of the canon there and just to be said, you've done something which is a partner to Jaws. It's a proper three-hander play with a lot of heart.
Hey guys, it's Ross over at the Daily Jaws with another exclusive 50th anniversary interview. Today's guest is a writer, producer, actor and director who has made an incredible contribution to the Jaws legacy. It gives me a huge amount of pleasure to welcome Mr. Guy Masterson, the director of The Shark is Broken. Guy, welcome.
Ross, good to see you.
Great to see you too. As we were saying just before we hit record, it's been a while and quite a journey.
It has been. God, to think it was exactly 6 years ago, May 2019, when I think we first spoke about it. We were in rehearsals at this time for we were in rehearsals in the upstairs room of a pub in Brighton. Just to give you some context. And I forget the pub. But I was doing about 3 days a week for about 4 weeks, I think we did. And that's all we had. That's all we had time for, because I used to have to come down from London. Mercifully, the Brighton team were all down there. So it was just a question of when I could get down and Duncan did all the arrangements and Duncan, who played Shida in the original production and eventually was the designer and pretty much handled all the logistics of the production as far as I could see at that end. And I just came down and worked with the guys in the rehearsal room, or in the upstairs room of a pub, should I say. I've got a lovely picture of Ian lying on his back wearing my Spurs hat because he forgot his shark hat. And he's a Chelsea supporter, so he didn't realize the cap he was wearing was the Spurs cap. So that brought me great joy. But yeah, it was lovely to see how the thing evolved, and just working with the lads in the room and tightening up the script in those first rehearsals to what it became.
Mm. And it became something truly, truly special. I mean, we've seen the show grow, as you say, from that pub to West End to Broadway, and it's just finished a UK tour. And you're at the moment directing the production that's going to be hitting Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah.
But before all of that, obviously, this has been inspired by Jaws, and obviously Ian's very personal journey with Jaws.
Yes.
I mean, what's your Jaws journey? I mean, when did you first see the movie? What do you remember about that experience?
Well, I insisted that we go and see it. I was far too young to see it. I think I was about 14, but I went to a boarding school in Sussex, and I only had very few times when I could actually see my mother. And in this particular day, I insisted that we go and see Jaws, and she really didn't want to see it, but even she was quite impressed with it. We went to the cinema in London and saw it. I think it must have been about 1976, wasn't it, when it was first released in England?
It was 70. It was towards the end of 75. Yeah.
Toward the end, yeah. So I would have gone up to London for the few hours I got off away from school, probably, yeah, early 75. Wow.
And what do you remember about seeing the movie?
Late 75. Oh, well, I just remember how exciting it was, how brilliant it was, how terrifying, everything that we still think of it as. And despite the mechanical shark and despite all of that, it still works so brilliantly. And the music, of course, the music is such a key
Mm.
part of it. Um, and uh, and of course, Quint's great speech. Um,
Mm.
and that always stuck in my mind. And Ian and I had a conversation about it. Just we touched upon it. What was it like having a father who was in Jaws? Sort of thing. But when I worked with Ian the first time, it was 19 in 2006. We did
Mm,
a project up in Wales, and I had a rich alcoholic uncle, film actor, and he
mm,
had a alcoholic father, film actor. And so we there was some common ground,
mm,
and we talked about that. But Ian was quite reticent to get into speaking about his dad at the time, and I knew that Ian wasn't really ready to do anything about his father. Um,
mm.
I suppose it's good for your viewers to know. My famous relative was Richard Burton, so very much of the same
Oh,
era
right.
as Robert Shaw.
Mm,
Played swashbuckling characters, devastatingly handsome, all that stuff, with that
mm,
Celtic sort of edge to him, and had the same sort of drinking problem, particularly in the 70s.
mm,
And I got to know him very, very well. And I had done when he died early in 1984. I had um, so not he didn't die early in 1984. He died on August the 5th, 1984. And I 10 years after that, I did a play about him, a one-man show,
mm,
where I wanted to put the record straight about him because he
mm,
wasn't just, what the papers called him, a wasted superstar, wasted talent, could have been the next Olivia. He was the next Olivia anyway. It's not that he wasted that.
mm,
But he had this rip-roaring relationship with Elizabeth Taylor, and which burned itself out after 12 years, and but they both they both got heavily involved in alcohol. Um,
mm,
and what it's like being that famous,
mm,
where you've got no privacy at all. So
mm,
anyway, I got to know Richard over a period of time, and so I was able to put those thoughts into this play and deal with the alcoholism as part of the context of a boy who came from a very poor family in Wales
mm,
to becoming, the world's first megastar, um, and dining with the Kennedys and the Queen and stuff like that. How does that happen?
mm,
I think Robert Shaw's journey was slightly different. It was probably more conventional in the sense that he was a stage actor and a writer and a poet and all those great things, and he lived for what he was doing.
mm,
And but he still alcohol still grabbed him. So when
mm,
Ian and I were working together in 2006, I mean, we didn't talk about it at great length, but he'd seen the play that I'd done about Uncle Richard, and we talked about how we'd handled that whole thing, and
mm,
the whole alcoholism thing. And I said, you've got to put it into context of where he'd come from, what had happened to him, and
mm,
and how once you understand that, then you can forgive the idea that he wasted his talent and that kind of thing. Anyway, cut a long story short, Ian and I remained friends all the way through the next 10 years. And then in 2000 and at the end of 2018, he called me and said, I've got an idea. Tell
mm.
me what you think. And he, the joke version of this is, how about three men in a boat? And I would say, yes, would that boat happen to be the Orca? And he go, yes. And I say, and who would play Dad? And he said, I was thinking of doing it. He said, silently, I'm sort of going,
Yeah.
the difference between Ian and I is that I don't look like Richard Burton, whereas Ian is a spitting image of his father. And
Mm,
my surname is not Burton. My surname is Masterson. And when I walk into a room, people aren't going to expect to see Richard Burton. Whereas when Ian walks into a room, one of the big
mm,
problems and difficulties that he faced was they were expecting Robert Shaw. And
Mm,
that's a hell of a burden to carry when you're a young actor trying to make your own journey. Anyway,
mm,
so he called me and I said, so he'd come to me with several projects prior to that to present and produce and or direct up at the Edinburgh Festival. And one of them was we were very close to producing it, but didn't quite make it happen. But this one was just quite clearly a winner.
mm,
And and then I said, so what would you like me to do? He said, well, I want you to produce it with
mm,
me, and I want you to direct it. And and it was almost like being given a gold watch. You
mm,
know, I'm thinking this. If we get this right, it could be amazing. Very
mm,
difficult for Ian because he has to tread that very personal line of being his father, dealing with the difficult questions, and
mm,
being true to the film
mm,
and deliver a great, entertaining, rip-roaring play. So I guess my job was to guide him and the production to its best possible outcome. And in the initial production, we knew we were going to play the Rialto in Brighton. So we
mm,
knew we had to set it up for that space. And we knew that we deliberately put it into a venue, I would call it a medium scale Edinburgh venue, 250 seats, black box.
mm,
Um, so we weren't going to do something spectacular with the set. We couldn't really afford to do anything spectacular with the set
mm,
in Edinburgh and get it up and down within the time that we have in Edinburgh, which was only 20 minutes either side of
mm,
the show. So we knew that what we were going to do in Edinburgh was going to be the essence of what it became. But
mm,
so we had to deliver something akin to what we knew it could be, but on a
mm,
level that could say to people, visualize this in a bigger space.
mm,
But we weren't, look, I've had lots of shows which have started in Edinburgh and gone to the West End and that kind of thing, but I don't think we were quite as expectant for this to have the response that it got. And it was great. It was a great sort of feeling for Ian and the team
mm,
because they produced it. Ultimately the Brighton team produced it. I in the
mm.
end presented it in Edinburgh and just directed it. So it was such a huge, wonderful dream, really, for
Mhm.
anybody in our business, having all those big West End producers fighting over it. Like it was like a bun fight. And the last producer of all, the one that we eventually went with in Edinburgh was the biggest producer of them, Sonia Friedman. So we'd met with
Yeah.
many of them, and
Mm,
they all wanted it, and they were all saying, "We'll give you what you want, we'll pay for everything," that kind of thing. And I think that Sonia just came in. I'm not belittling what they said at all, but Sonia just came in and said exactly what we wanted to hear,
mm,
exactly what she felt the play was, exactly what she knew that Ian wanted to hear, which was
mm,
true, that this was a play about boys and fathers and not
mm,
just a play about Jaws. So there was a lot
mm,
more to it, you know. And I think that's one of the reasons it was such a big success because it wasn't just a celebration of Jaws. It wasn't just a rip-roaring comedy. There was a
mm.
lot more to it on so many levels, you know.
Yeah. It's incredible because well, obviously we've had a very um close relationship with the show. I mean, we came to see it in Brighton back in 2019, and it's such one of the things that you said there. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but there was one thing that you said there about just trying to imagine the show in a bigger space. And
Mm.
for me, because I went with Dean, chief writer of the Daily Jaws, and we were just like, this show could play anywhere because it's such an intimate portrayal, as you say, of
Mm.
not just the making of a movie, but the relationship between three guys, but also that whole subtext around fathers and sons.
Mm.
Because it's about, as you say, with Ian specifically, for people that don't know, Ian does look exactly like his dad. He's not like his dad in the respect, but he is very easily, compared to him, or just as soon as he walks
Well,
in a
you've
room,
got to
Robert Shaw
remember
walks
that
in the room.
he is like his dad, actually very like his dad, except the Robert Shaw that we know, of course, is the Robert Shaw from the movies.
Mm,
And of course, we know that he had an alcohol problem. And Ian, of course, has looked at all of that and said, I'm not going to have that same problem.
Mm,
But everything else about Robert Shaw and Ian, they share a great many traits. You know, their
mm,
intellectualism, their ability at writing, their poetic personalities, all of that stuff. You know, Robert was a very cultured man. So Ian didn't just fit it with his looks; he fit
mm,
it with his spirit, and that
mm,
came through very, very strongly. One of the key things that I was very conscious of as director of this was that I knew I would have to push the characters to, to be able to deliver some kind of a drama
mm,
with the audience. So it wasn't just three men in a boat arguing for one scene, arguing for the next scene, arguing for the next scene. There had to be some kind of an arc.
mm,
And in Edinburgh, we only had 75 minutes. Was it
mm,
even 70? Um, and to find an arc, it originally started as a series of scenes, but Ian and Joseph had cleverly placed the Indianapolis scenes interspersed the journey of the Indianapolis speech throughout the
mm,
play. You set it up in the first scene, then you have how bad it is in the next version of it. Then you have the drunken Indianapolis speech where he fails and gets drinks too much, fails, and then
mm,
you have the final triumph. And then so there was where was the arc of this play that was actually going to keep the audience on their seats and really entranced by the thing. There has to be something which keeps them in
mm,
there, not just observing three actors being quite witty and funny and all of that stuff. And we realized that, if you take the premise that without the Indianapolis scene, Jaws would not be anywhere close to what it is. Without the Indianapolis speech, it would be a horror film about a shark. Just as Ian says, it's about a shark. you know. Um, no, but what's it really about? It's really about a shark. And but it's not. It's so much more than that because, as in the first scene, Ian explains they can't cut it. It explains why Quint's such a maniac. And
mm,
once you understand that, then there is real drama for any audience looking on. I mean, he's such a maniac. You've got Moby Dick in there, you've got Captain Ahab, you've got all of this stuff. What's Quint going to do? Are they going to
mm,
get the shark? Who's going to die? That kind of thing. So it becomes an incredibly tense piece of movie making. So with us, we didn't have any of the visuals. We didn't have a shark. We didn't have any of that. So where was the tension going to come?
mm,
And they were very clever in identifying that the tension was going to come with us feeling that without the Indianapolis speech, you wouldn't have a play. There wouldn't be
mm,
a Jaws.
mm,
And if you then add into that to the powder keg that's Robert Shaw, you add into that the tension of this 16-week shoot, the tension of Dreyfus behaving like a twat most of the time and driving him up the wall, and then the alcoholism. He was getting his bottles given to him on the boat over by his aide,
mm,
and then he surreptitiously starts sipping them. By halfway through the shoot, he was openly drinking them. Three a day.
mm,
So the question would have been, what could happen to that speech if Robert Shaw can't deliver it?
mm,
And what would happen to Jaws? And so nesting that idea throughout the play was important because it's not a play. It's a series of scenes which
mm.
all add up to being a play. But the tension comes when you think, crikey, is he gonna get to the end of this? Or is he gonna kill Dreyfus? Or is Spielberg gonna just cancel it, which he threatened to do? Remember? I mean,
Mm,
Shaw called him up in the middle of the night and said, "I'm really sorry. Just before you take all the equipment off the boat, let me have another go. I promise I'll get it right." And of course, we
mm.
now know that he did, and thank God he did. So
Yeah.
yes, so that was the journey of the play, and we didn't have all that in Edinburgh. We had just enough to give people the feeling that there was something special in here.
Mm.
And then when we went to the West End, when Sonia Friedman invited us to the West End, she basically said to us, "Dream, lads. How do you want this thing to look? What do you want to do with it?" And firstly, there was a scene about Dreyfus, we
Mm.
call it the Dreyfus hyperventilation scene. And that gives Dreyfus a bit more context. That gives us a feeling of what was going on in Dreyfus's head.
Mm.
And then I included three what I call interludes, where we could sit back and just observe the guys doing nothing.
Mm.
You don't want to watch three guys arguing for 90 minutes. So there were three moments where we could just sit back and just allow them to get some space from each other, and then back into the piece.
Mm.
But then I realized that actually those interludes could be part of the story too. The
Mm.
first interlude we eventually made into a scene writing interlude where Dreyfus is up sunning himself on the front. Scheider is out in the back, smoking,
Mm.
and all these things that they did. Scheider was smoking like a chimney and sunning himself, and they were Shaw busily rewriting the Indianapolis speech, which of course we know he did.
Mm.
And then the next interlude, the drinking gets heavier and heavier, and because of the altercation that he has with Dreyfus, which is a true story, where he strangled him, and said, "Never touch another man's booze." Didn't ever anybody ever tell you that? Never touch another man's booze. And he was so ashamed of himself, that he was so upset with what happened because he'd been
Mm.
driven to it. And then,
Mm.
of course, he drank himself into an oblivion before the first take of the Indianapolis.
Mm.
And of course, we dramatize what really happened. No one, I mean, none of us, but the crew really know what happened. But he wasn't able to continue and get it right. And Stephen was going to cut the whole speech. It
Mm.
had been nothing but a bane in the production. This speech, it was 18 pages long at one point.
Mm.
And Robert said, for God's sake, let me have a go. And if, thank God he was a Pulitzer Prize nominated writer, and he was able to do
Mm.
it. And of course, he was the one performing it, so no one was going to do it better than that. And
Mm.
he did. But of course, he collapses, and then so I used the next interlude, which we only did in the West End at first, which was when he goes out and stands up to the storm. Do you remember that?
Mm.
And
Yes, I remember.
and that was a lovely one of those great magical moments of theatre because we needed to extend one of the scenes. We just needed to make it a little longer, just to establish that Shaw was drunk. And Ian and Joseph came back with these words from Lear. You know, I know that there is a part you could play in Shakespeare. The fool, he says. You play fool and I'll play Lear. How about that? You know, and then of course he falls over drunk. And I thought, well, let's carry this Lear idea through. Let's
Mm.
make what was originally a squall in the distance into a full-blown storm, which surrounds the boat and with lightning flashing and everything. And I said to Ian, just go up on the back of the boat and basically dare the storm to knock you off, as
Mm.
in Lear on the moor. And then the night before we actually did it for the first time, just at about six, I think it was about 6 o'clock, I said to Ian, Ian, just at that moment when that big lightning flash happens, let go completely, as if you're surfing, basically saying, giving up you to the storm, like King Lear did, and it became one of those great moments for me. I was sitting with my wife. She squeezed my hand so tightly because she knew that that was the moment when you thought this whole thing could collapse right now. Jaws is over.
Mm.
You that there's no way that Robert Shaw can come back from this. And then of course the next scene is the hyperventilation scene,
Mm.
where Shaw comes in and saves Dreyfus from himself with this incredible rendition of a sonnet. It's all very dramatic and funny and sad and powerful and moving. And of course, those scenes never really happened in that way. We don't know how those scenes happened, but it
Mm.
tells the story of what might have happened. Gives us an insight into those three characters locked on that bloody boat for God knows how long.
Mm.
And it delivers a great piece of theatre. And ultimately that's what we were able to do. Then so that was Olivia nominated, which was lovely, and it
Mm.
got extended in the West End. And then we were invited to Broadway. Well, we did Toronto first. Toronto was an interesting one
Mm.
because we were playing to in a big theatre, very big theatre, 1,800 seats, sprawling theatre, beautiful, but probably too big for the play. A
Mm.
lot of the intimacy was lost. Still worked, but you know, for the first time they had to really work with mics, so you could.
Mm.
Um, and I think uh, I realized that from a director's point of view, that there was something missing from this. We were observing three characters going through it rather than really becoming involved with them.
Mm.
The intimacy had gone.
Mm.
And another thing we realized, the Canadians are really nice people, and they don't particularly like three men going at it for 70 minutes,
Mm.
arguing and bitching, and they don't particularly like. So you could argue that Shaw was bullying Dreyfus at some points
Mm.
with his constant sniping, and Dreyfus was just egging him on with his constant snapbacks.
Mm.
And it makes for great comedy, but actually, the Canadian audience were getting a bit tired of it. It didn't
Mm.
work the way it worked in London. We have a different sense of
Mm.
humor. But
Mm.
it was a big warning for us that you can't assume that something that works in London was going to work in North America.
Mm.
And it didn't work as well in Canada as we wanted it to. So we knew we had to do something for Broadway. So
Mm.
that was the next evolution of it. What were we going to do for Broadway? And Ian and Joseph were tasked with balancing the characters more. So Scheider needed a story. What was his story? And can we soften can we soften Dreyfus a little or give him some context? And
Mm.
Ian found a story which was printed in The Guardian about his father. It was a very simple comment. And he says that his father walked out on him the night of his 21st birthday.
Mm.
And that one comment, I said, that one comment contextualizes Dreyfus's need for this father figure that he puts on the shoulders of Robert Shaw. And Robert
Mm.
Shaw didn't want that, of course.
Mm.
He does, and therefore it gives much more context and balance to what happens in that scene when Shaw says, "I do accept you. I do accept
Mm.
you. Just don't ask me for praise. I'll never give you praise, but I do accept you, and I wouldn't want this any other way." Which was
Mm.
all that was. And so by the end of it, they've all found common ground. They've all been part of this great journey. They've all supported each other like a team of footballers who finally get together and actually win a football match, you know. Um, and they all respect Robert Shaw hugely because they know that without him, the piece doesn't have the gravitas, wouldn't have the gravitas that it
Mm.
needed to become the great blockbuster that it did,
Mm.
you know.
It's such an incredible story to hear the evolution of the play. Because when I saw it the first time, I saw it in its infancy in Brighton, then I went to see it again in London, and they were two very different plays, even though they were the same, if that makes sense. From a director's point of view, and I guess from an editor's point of view, obviously Jaws was brilliantly directed and made and perfectly edited, but obviously that production had a lot of problems. In terms of The Shark is Broken, were there any days where you just thought we're not going to crack this, or there's that particular scene, I don't think we're going to make it work, and you did? And was there anything that didn't
No,
make it into the final play that you would like to have seen?
no, no. I think Ian and I had some very intense conversations about how far we needed to go.
Mm,
I was always one saying, look, this isn't just about Jaws. It's not just about a father-son. It's about all three. We,
mm,
we really need to balance this for the American audience. That was one key thing, because, first and foremost, you take Jaws to America, it's produced and directed by a British company with a British director who's actually half American, by the way. I'm half American. And with from Shaw's perspective, Americans are very parochial. They don't like their great cultural icons being shared by anybody. So who was this British Robert Shaw character to tell us, how the great Jaws was made? There was an element of that, and so we had to look at it very carefully and say, right, we have to treat this. We need to treat those two other characters very
mm,
respectfully because they were as much a part of Jaws as Quint was, of course.
mm,
All we're saying about Quint is that without him, the film wouldn't be what it is.
mm,
It would have still been a pretty fine thriller.
mm,
Um, but yeah, so Ian and Joseph had to consider very carefully the balance of those characters, and my job was to make sure that that was coming out. So the way I look at the work that I do is I never conceptualize a play. I don't think I want it to
mm,
look like this. I My job is purely to make sure that it's working. What they're giving me is working, and and it's telling the story, and
mm,
and I've long learned to trust that what I'm feeling is what the audience is going to feel,
mm,
and I have to trust that. That's the only thing a director can do. So it's like a prism through which the play is seen, and you go, this isn't working. I just need to tweak that. You get the actors on board. Let's try it that way, and I can say, yeah, that's now working. It's telling the story. So
mm,
that was pretty much all I did. I never sort of said I wanted to look like this. I would say apart from the what I do, the King Lear moment on the boat with the storm, because that was manufactured. I said to Nina, the videographer, I said, Nina, can you bring the storm from the back of the auditorium into on all around the boat? Can I? And I said to my lighting designer, I said, could you give me lights and flashes and boom boom boom, and the sound guy, give me a storm which is so loud that the audience are off their feet. And I remember Ian saying to me, really? And I said, yeah. And it really does. And you could
mm,
argue that it's artificial, of course. They were never involved in a huge big storm, but theatre's metaphor as well. And um
mm.
and that's a metaphor for what was going on.
But the thing for me, there's a couple of things there that again, it's so wonderful just to listen and hear these stories because I thought I knew the play, but now I'm really starting to understand. Much like the movie itself, you hear about different people talking about it or what they bring to it, obviously having that inside view that you've got, and it's really just amazing what you can make from just that initial idea of that conversation that you and Ian had, and just the Anglo-US thing. Like with the Daily Jaws, a lot of people were surprised that I'm British. They always, for many years, people thought that I was American because it's an American movie. And to your point, there's a real sort of, particularly something as iconic as Jaws. It's the peak of American cinema, particularly arguably the most important era of American cinema.
Mm.
But I think the Daily Jaws and the Shark is Broken have done the right thing in the right way. We both understand what we have. We understand how pressured it is and how iconic it is, and we
Mm.
treat it with the utmost respect. So when we do present how we think Jaws could be, or to your point, a story about fathers and sons that's framed around Jaws, how that can be, I think audiences are generally very, very receptive. And I've not heard a bad thing said about the play. Everyone absolutely loves and raves
Mm.
about it. But it's great to know that you've made those tweaks to make sure that it does play in the right way in front of the right audiences. It's just again, this is why I'm having these conversations with people, particularly around the 50th anniversary, because it's a massive landmark. But there is so much there that something like Jaws can continue to give. I mean, I think I was talking about it to someone the other day. I think this is probably the only time in history that someone's son is playing their father
Mm.
in a play about a movie that they made. I don't think that's ever happened before. I can't think of any
No,
other examples. I mean,
I
how?
think you're right. I think you're right. I mean, the closest thing we've got to it is probably Kirk Douglas was going to, so Michael Douglas was going to play in, um, uh, what's it called? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Um,
Yes.
and he wanted to do it, and he got the rights from his dad. His dad played it on Broadway,
Mm,
and in the end, he was persuaded not to do it and to give it to
mm,
Jack Nicholson. And we all know what happened with that. But
mm,
that was a pretty close thing. But yeah, no, it's the meta aspect. We call that the meta aspect. A son playing his father on stage, playing the actor that's playing him, and that does, in the audience's mind, it works. It's a fascinating thing, which brings me on to another thing. Ian isn't doing the Martha's Vineyard performance. He wasn't able to be involved because he was doing the national tour. I don't know how long the tour was, 18, 20 weeks, I don't know.
mm,
And he's just finished it, and basically he just couldn't face doing it again. And I had to get the thing produced in order to be ready for Martha's Vineyard.
mm,
So he couldn't do it. However, in the West End, we had three incredible understudies, covers and it was during COVID. So it was the first time. Normally we'd have two covers for three characters, and you'd be able to cover it. But because it was COVID, we had to have three covers, and each cover had to cover two characters. So they had to learn two characters. And the worst case scenario was that all three actors were out at the same time. We were the only show of Sonia Friedman's during Christmas of 2019 that stayed open. Everything else shut down. We stayed open for the whole thing because we had actors who could do it. And Ian had missed 10 performances because of COVID.
mm,
And we all piled into the theatre that night to see what it was going to be like. Would the audience buy it being played by a different actor? And it was not only was Will Wallace, was Will absolutely brilliant. But once you got over the fact that it wasn't Ian, the play
mm,
worked. And
mm,
that for a producer is huge. It meant that it wasn't Ian dependent,
mm,
and Ian's was relieved about this because it meant that he didn't feel the pressure of having to turn up every night and do the performance if he was ill,
mm,
and even bigger for him is the fact that it can now be produced anywhere else around the world without him,
mm.
which is very good for his bank balance, I can say. But
Hey guys, it's Ross. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the series. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about some of the organisations that we've been working with that help make this episode possible. Stern Pinball, the oldest and largest designer and manufacturer in arcade quality pinball games. Here is their Jaws game.
Fire the harpoon! Shoot! Fast fish.
Well, nothing's easy, is it?
This shark will eat anything.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Pretty cool, huh? Well, Stern don't only make pinball machines, they've also made a generous donation to the two organisations that we're spotlighting throughout the series. Minorities in Shark Sciences, or MISS for short, a non-profit founded in 2020 that champions diversity in shark, ray and marine sciences. MISS creates equitable opportunities for historically underrepresented communities through hands-on programs and believes that diverse scientists bring diverse ideas, driving the innovation essential for ocean conservation. Representation matters, and MISS is making sure the next generation sees a place for themselves in marine biology. Learn more and support their mission at missalesmo.org. The mission of the Tourette Association of America is to provide help and hope to those affected by Tourette syndrome, tic disorders, and associated conditions through awareness, research, and support. It's the only national organisation serving the community and works to raise awareness, advance research, and provide ongoing support to patients and families impacted by Tourette syndrome and tic disorders. To this end, the Tourette Association of America directs a network of 31 chapters, 83 support groups, and recognises 18 centres of excellence across the country. It's a non-profit organisation and is extremely close to the heart of not just Jeffrey Kramer, but also his family. Guys, thanks for listening. Let's get back to the conversation.
And so when I was recasting this for Martha's Vineyard, I knew that I had to have 3 actors who were spot on, and I found them, and they are really, really remarkable, phenomenal, in fact, and it's beautiful to see because, of course, they're terrified of working with me. That's worked with all iterations of this play, going, basically that sort of sense of an actor going, am I gonna cut the mustard? Particularly the guy playing Shaw. And I said, stop worrying about it. You're a brilliant actor. Just play the character as you feel him. It's all in the writing, and my job is to make sure that you're in the right place. That's all. And he did, and he is remarkable. And the play works fantastically, and we did get phenomenal reviews. So I'm looking very much forward to, even though there will be an element of, damn it, Ian's not in it. But the funny thing would be, Ian could slip into my production in Martha's Vineyard if he wanted to, because it's the same production effectively. I've used pretty much the same blocking. If it ain't, don't fix it. I've even been lucky enough to get the same video designer in Nina Dunn, and same sound designer in Adam Cork, and and the same designer, Duncan. So it's pretty much as good as the Broadway version, but with 3 different actors.
Because I also have to say as well, I've spoken at length with the producer, David Elliott, who is so passionate about this production. It's incredible. So it's like the dream team coming together. And if The Shark is Broken was going to perform anywhere, it had to be at Martha's Vineyard at some point. So it's great to see that the right people are kind of at the helm.
That was a key thing, because when David called me and said, we've got the rights to do Vineyard, do you want in? And I said, that's the only one I want to do. But actually, what we've created is, I said, why? Let's not just do this for Martha's Vineyard. Let's do this in a modular way. Let's get Duncan to redesign it so that we can do this big, small, or middle. Let's get Nina to give us either 3 screens or 1 screen. We can do this in small theaters or big theaters. And I was actually thinking about creating a company of actors that could interchange. So you could have actors, you could put this on in Phoenix, you could put this on in LA, and Ian could drop into any one of them if he chose to. And actually, I do know the direction of this, so I do know that Ian wouldn't have a problem fitting in, slotting in right to it. It'd be very interesting for the other actors on stage.
It would, but the thing is, though, I mean, again, whenever we've posted about the tour, so for example, the last tour that they've just done with Ian is the UK Irish tour. We post exactly where it's going to be, and then everyone tells us where it should be. So I think your idea about putting it in, having a company that can roll out the show that's directed by the original director of the show and produced by such a great team like David and his partner, and having that on in the major cities across America during, the Jaws 50 year, for me, it's a no-brainer. I think it would do really, really well. So I really hope you guys give that some serious consideration, because, you've always got our backing, obviously, because, I mean, when I saw it, I thought, is this going to be a gimmicky play? Are they just going to be riffing on the fact that this is Robert Shaw's son playing the part? And it's not that at all. It's not that at all.
I remember seeing you right afterwards when we had I hadn't drunk alcohol for about 3 months before that. And I had some alcohol that day, and we met, I think, face to face. We talked on the phone, but we'd met face to face. your eyes were big. You were so
Oh,
excited about what
yeah.
you'd just seen. Yeah, and we felt very confident after that, after you guys had seen it, and the other Jaws fans that had come in their Jaws t-shirts and everything. That was a new thing. That was unexpected for me, that people get dressed up as their favorite character and come along.
Oh yeah. This is the thing about again, I guess it's not even just Jaws, it's fan passion. And when people have something like The Shark is Broken to go and watch and enjoy and experience in real time, it's not a DVD or a movie that you're putting on through streaming or DVD. It's
No.
real life people out there with that additional layer of that personal connection, and obviously that whole journey that Ian's gone through, and
Mm.
obviously mirroring your own with your uncle Richard. It's just like there's so much context and layers to this play. I just think it's basically what I'm saying is everybody should go and see this. I think, if you just want a good piece of theatre, go see The Shark is Broken. If you're a Jaws fan, obviously go see it. It's just great when the right people, as I say, get hold of the right material and do it justice for exactly the right reasons.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
think you're right.
it's just
Yeah.
amazing. It's incredible.
I think we all
Um,
feel that. Duncan is incredibly passionate about everything, and his designs are assiduous.
mm,
The correct materials, the correct colors, the exact size of the cabin. Everything is perfect with him.
mm,
And that was a key thing. Uh,
mm,
Nina is the most incredible video designer, and she
mm,
was just she how she works is she speaks with the director, she watches the play, and then she creates an ambience and a visual behind us that gives the context. She said, "What time of day is this scene happening?"
mm,
7 o'clock in the morning. They've just come out for the first scene. It's cold and everything like this, and you can see it in the scape. It's there.
mm,
You can just see the wispy mist coming off the sea, all of that kind of stuff. Then the hot days, and she really captures all of that. And Adam Cork, well, there's not enough words to describe Adam Cork's work. He told me that in The Shark is Broken, he'd put more elements in his soundscape than in anything else he'd ever done in his life, because he was creating a reality soundscape as if he'd
mm.
been on Martha's Vineyard. There's a very funny story attached to this, by the way. We couldn't find there's a boat creek during the Indianapolis scene.
Yes.
There's a boat creek. And Adam couldn't quite get that boat creek, couldn't find it. He searched everywhere for it and everything like this. And I was sitting there with my wife, Brigitte, and one morning, it was close to the opening in London, and my bare foot was on this wooden coffee table, and I moved it, and there was a squeak. I sort of went, and I moved it again, squeak. I said, hold on, and I recorded this. So where is it? Where is it? SIB Boat Creek 1. Can you hear that?
Okay, stop.
Okay, stop, she says, right? Okay, stop. So anyway, I gave it to Adam,
Yeah.
and he didn't edit the okay, stop out. So he put it into the West End on loop, right, throughout the whole play. And every so often you get, okay, stop. Right. But of course, we couldn't hear it in the audience. We couldn't hear it in
Yeah.
the audience. So because it was being funneled under the boat and these big speakers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so the boys are talking deeply about the fathers. My father used to jump into the water, tie a rope around his waist, and swim to shore, and there would be his medical bag, and then this voice would say, "Okay, stop." Anyway,
Oh,
okay,
God, that's
stop.
so funny.
So
That
all
is,
three actors would sort of go. And so we were
you
in
know,
rehearsal. We were in rehearsal, and we had what's the unbalanced version of the soundscape.
yeah.
And I heard it come up on the thing, and I went, "What the hell is that?" And it sounded like a okay, stop, sort of thing. I went, "What the hell is that?" And Ian said, "Yeah, what is that? We've been living with that for 9 months in the West End. 9 months we've been doing that. What is it?" So I eventually found it, and it was Brigitte's voice. Ian thought it was. Ian thought that Adam had gone out to Martha's Vineyard and recorded this seabird, a very specific seabird, very unique to Martha's Vineyard, and that it was an
Mm.
authentic sound. It's the most hilarious moment.
So there was technically four people on stage.
There were four people in the stage on loop all through. Yeah.
Did Brigitte get a credit in the poster?
No, the only time we found it after London, but eventually all it was a question of was nipping the end off it. But that creek, it's called Guy's Creeks, Guy's
Guys,
Boat.
Creed, that
But
is
I will send it to
hilarious.
you.
I absolutely love that story. That's such a good one.
Yeah, it's you know, I love these stories that come through with the old time filmmakers. Now, of course, they do it all with AI and
Mm,
stuff. But you know, what's brilliant about that movie and Steven Spielberg in particular is that you know what they were able to do to get the story told, and
mm,
that, for example, and then the eye and the special effects and the you know it is remarkable.
mm,
That you actually all we need to see is what's coming through the lens of the camera. And you know, we're not looking at a full picture, we're looking at very specific things.
mm,
And it's only what the director needs you to see to tell the story. With theatre,
mm,
it's slightly different. It's we tend to watch everything that's going on and we scan all three characters, particularly when they're in the boat at the same time. Because
mm.
they're each speaking, and you're not just looking at the person who's speaking, you're looking at the person who's receiving, because
Yeah.
you're buying into the non-verbal signals that that person is giving off,
Mm,
and that's what gives it its full three-dimensional or four-dimensional, if you want to bring in soul. That's what makes live theatre so great.
mm.
You know,
And
film is
I
a
think,
very two-dimensional medium.
mm,
But when it's done really well, it completely engrosses you. Theatre
yeah.
has to be, I think, much deeper than that because, and that's why it takes so long to rehearse, because the actors need to completely immerse themselves in the characters and
Mm,
to feel what it feels like to be in that situation.
mm,
You know, the guy playing Robert Shaw, for example, has to feel what it's like getting on that bloody launch every morning with a fresh bottle of whiskey in his pocket having to endure another possible 8 hours on that boat with nothing happening. And so every scene, you know, you're not just talking about what the scene is about, you're talking about what you're bringing into the scene. Where were you
mm.
before the scene started? And that's what an actor has to think because that's the story the audience needs to receive.
The reason we're having these conversations, because you're now going to be part of an ongoing series of interviews that I've been doing for the 50th anniversary. We're trying to celebrate, obviously, the movie itself, but obviously, you know, you're a very uniquely placed individual in the Jaws legacy because you've contributed directly to it. I mean, for me, The Shark is Broken is the ultimate companion piece to the movie. You know,
Well,
it really
that's
is an amazing
That's
thing.
an honor, absolutely.
Um, in terms of the legacy of Jaws, I guess this is a two-part question. I guess, what do you think is the legacy of Jaws? You know, we're sitting here 50 years later talking about it. And where do you think The Shark is Broken sits within that legacy?
Well, that's very hard to put Shark is Broken in. That would be a big claim. I would say that, well, firstly, Jaws is a remarkable piece of movie storytelling by a remarkable director and a bunch of incredibly talented young filmmakers. It's got youth written all over it. It's got newness written all over it. It broke the mold. It moved movie making into a new era. Where the shark is broken is a tribute to that, but it's also very much a piece of theatre in its own right, in the
Mm,
sense that we have the context given to us by Jaws, given to us by the truth of Jaws, i.e., the delays and the fact that the Orca was used as a green room, and that was the brilliant thing that Ian and Joseph brought was, you know, once you've decided the context and the staging, it's going to be in the boat, so you've got the claustrophobia. You know, our job was to say, well, what is the story that's happening with the actors? And
mm,
then if there's any crossover, it's in the similarity between the characters you see in the play and the characters we see in the film,
mm,
and the moments that we see in the film that you can say, oh yeah, that guy is absolutely where he was when he filmed that scene. So it is a companion piece in that respect. You can see each one of those actors slotting into the movie. You can just imagine them leaving the boat, getting on that launch, shooting the scene, being brought back to the boat. You can you can see it sits alongside the making of the movie, and in that respect, it would be an honor to be part of the canon there, and just to be said, you've done something which is a partner to Jaws. I mean, that's a huge acclaim. But I do think it is a special piece. It's more special than I think people who haven't seen it probably think. They might think it's a bit of a comedy based on a gimmick, but it's not. It's a proper three-hander play with a lot of heart, and it can make you laugh, it can make you cry, and it makes you joyous that Jaws was made.
I think there's a very big similarity there, and just in terms of Jaws being about a shark, it's not. It's about a lot more, and the shark is broken. Is not just about a broken shark or the making of a movie. There's so much more to it. Guy, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you taking the time as well, because I know you've got a bit of a cough at the moment. So thank you for taking the time out to talk to us again.
My pleasure. It's great to
Tell
speak to you.
tell us about the play Martha's Vineyard. Where can people see it? When can they see it? How can they book tickets?
Well, they can book if they go to oh my God, sbmv.org, I think, or .com. It's The Shark Has Broken Martha's Vineyard, or just Google Shark Has Broken Martha's Vineyard. You'll find all the ticket sales. I'm not up with all those, the jargon on that, but it's going to be playing for between 3 and 4 weeks at the Performing Arts Centre in Edgartown. It is a beautiful theatre, big theatre, and the audience are going to get as close to a Broadway production as they would have done if they came all the way down to New York. They're going to get a damn good night of theatre. A lot of fun.
I can't wait. Well, the best of luck to you guys. I'm hoping to maybe get out there myself, so maybe we'll be able to see it with my own eyes. But yeah, we'll keep you posted. Oh, Guy, thank you so much again for taking time out to talk to us. It's been a real pleasure. Guys, I've been Ross for the Daily Jaws, speaking with the legendary Guy Masterson, director of The Shark Is Broken. Plenty more interviews to come in this amazing series for the 50th anniversary of Jaws. But until next time, I'll drink to your legs and I'll bid you a fond farewell and adieu. That's it for today's deep dive into Jaws, the film that turned beaches into no-swim zones and created the summer blockbuster. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to follow, rate and review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, just when you thought it was safe to stop listening, there's plenty more episodes to come. Thanks again to Stern Pinball for making this episode possible. Please be sure to check out the work of Minorities in Shark Sciences and also the Tourette's Association of America. That's it for now, guys, but I'll catch you next time. I'll drink to your legs.